Civil Rights and Civil Liberties by Juliana Mooneyham. First up, we have the freedom of religion, which basically means you are free to practice any religion you want, and Congress cannot make a national religion. So that ties into the two clauses, which is the free exercise clause, which means you can practice any religion you would like, and the establishment clause, which is that government has to stay out of religion. And obviously there are limitations, like you're not allowed to do human sacrifice, even if your religion thinks it's a good thing. Next up, we have freedom of speech. You have the freedom to openly state your opinions. And there is some misconceptions because a lot of people think that you can just say whatever you want with no consequences, but there can be consequences because the freedom of speech only applies, you're only protected from the government interfering with your freedom of speech. So private institutions can interfere if they don't like what you're saying. And the speech that is most protected is political speech. So you have the most freedom to talk about political stuff. Next up, we have freedom of the press. This prevents the government from censoring the press. So again, just like the last one, you can't be protected from private companies, meaning that you only have freedom of the press from the government. So if you post something on a private company's website, they have the right to take it down if they don't like it. And sometimes national security is more important than freedom of the press, which allows the government to step in to protect the country. Search and seizure protects us from unreasonable search and seizure. If the police have probable cause to search you, then they don't need a warrant. So if they, for example, if you break a law like speeding, they don't need a warrant to search your car because you already have broken a law, so they have reasonable cause. And then students don't have the same protections as adults, which can be a misconception because a lot of students think just because they're United States citizens that they have the exact same rights as adults do, but because of public safety, they do not, because the government wants to keep schools safe and the kids in the schools safe. So, and then due process of law, the government officials cannot take your life, liberty, or property without a fair trial. And there's multiple clauses to this due process. So you have the right to a jury trial. You cannot be tried twice for the same crime. And you have the right to not witness against yourself, which these are kind of like the Miranda rights, where you have the right to a lawyer. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That's their rights. And then it does not only apply to criminal cases, which is what a lot of people think, but it can apply to any instance where the government is trying to take your life, liberty, or property. Next up, we have the 9th Amendment, which says that we have more rights than the ones explicitly stated in the Constitution. So in this picture, it actually lists out what the 9th Amendment says exactly, which is the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So the 9th Amendment protects rights, but it doesn't create them. It is just basically saying that you have more rights than the ones that are only in the Constitution. A lot of people think that it is too vague to be helpful, but this is not the case. The Supreme Court has used the 9th Amendment many times in their rulings to give the people rights. The 10th Amendment states that power not given to the federal government is given to the states. So if it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution that it is for the federal government to do, then it's passed down to the states and respectively the people. But the elastic clause creates confusion because that clause gives Congress the power to stretch their powers to do stuff that wasn't said in the Constitution, because obviously our nation has evolved since it was first created, and so they put the elastic clause in the Constitution to give Congress the power to review things that weren't thought of at the time of the Constitution being created. So that creates some confusion. And then a lot of people think that the 10th Amendment gives states sovereign power because it gives power to the states, but we still have a federal government, so therefore we're not sovereign states. Equal protection means that no state shall deny anybody the equal protection of the law. And there are multiple levels of scrutiny for the Supreme Court that they use to review cases regarding equal protection. So the highest level is strict scrutiny, which is usually used for protected class, which is minorities. And then intermediate scrutiny, which is like the level in between that. And then the lowest level is rational basis for review. And usually the government loses the strict scrutiny cases, but they'll usually win the rational basis for review. And then this clause only applies to state actions, not private companies. So, as in previous ones, you're only protected from the government infringing on your rights, not private companies. And finally, we have discrimination. If you're a citizen, no one is supposed to discriminate against you. But obviously, we have had discrimination in this country in the past, and even sometimes in the present, and it's a terrible thing. A lot of people believe discrimination is always intentional, but this is not always the case, because sometimes it's just out of ignorance and being uneducated. And another misconception is that people might not realize that discrimination is not limited to just race. You can be discriminated against because of your gender, because of your age, because you have a disability, because of your race. There's a lot of factors that can cause somebody to be discriminated against, which is really terrible. And that's all I have, so thank you for watching.